The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 23rd Day. It is time now to talk about Saint Dominic and the Order of Preachers. Dominic de Guzman was born in 1170, in the village of Kelga, Old Castile, which was under jurisdiction of the Bishop of Osma. Before his birth, his mother had a dream, in which she saw her future son as a dog carrying in its jaws an ardent labrise, that is to say, a burning axe of double blade. Such symbol interested vividly to the lords of Tharsis, because they considered it a sign that Saint Dominic was predestined for the cult of the cold fire. Thence the lords of Tharsis watched attentively during his childhood, and, once concluded the primary instruction, they arranged an area for him in the University of Palencia, which in that moment was located in the zenith of its academic prestige. The motive was clear. In Palencia the famous Bishop Peter of Tharsis taught theology, better known by the sobriquet Petrenio, who enjoyed of unlimited confidence by part of the King Alfonso VIII, of whom he was one of his main counselors. What occurred 50 years before to his cousin, the Bishop Lupo, was an admonition that could not be overpassed, and due to this Petrenio lived behind the walls of the university, in a very modest house, but which had the advantage of being provided of a small private chapel. There he had, for his contemplation, a reproduction of Our Lady of the Grotto. In the chapel, Petrenio initiated Dominic de Guzman in the mystery of the cold fire, and was so great the transmutation produced in him, that soon he became man of stone, in an Hyperborean initiate, provided with great dramaturgical powers, and not minor wisdom. Such deep was the devotion of Saint Dominic de Guzman, that, it was said, the Unholy Virgin responded to the monk in his prayers. He was who communicated to Petrenio that he had seen Our Lady of the Grotto, with a rose necklace. And Petrenio indicated that such ornament was equivalent to Skull's necklace of Friar Caliber. Friar Caliber, seen from out of himself, appeared dressed of death and wearing the necklace, with the skulls of her assassinated husbands. The skulls were the accounts with words of the deceit. Instead Friar, seen from the depths of himself, behind her veil of death, that represents a terrible for the soul, was the naked truth of the eternal spirit, the Virgin of Agatha, of absolute beauty, and immaculate. Would be natural that she would wear a necklace of roses in which each sprout represent the hearts of those who were loved by her with the cold fire. Dominic remained vividly captivated with that vision, and not stopped until he invented the rosary, which consisted in the cord, with 3 sets of 16 fixed small balls, with rose petals. The 16, 13 plus 3, corresponded to the mysteries of the Virgin. The Rosary of Saint Dominic is used to pronounce orderly prayers, or mantrams, that goes producing a mystical state in the devotee of the Virgin, and finally turning on the cold fire in the heart. Must not surprise that I mentioned 16 mysteries of the Virgin, and that today left only 15, neither the variation in the number of accounts of the Rosary, nor that today the Rosary is associated to the mysteries of Jesus Christ, and that the mysteries of Our Lady of the Child of Stone have been occulted, because all the work of Saint Dominic has been systematically deformed and distorted, as by the enemies of his order, as by the traitors that existed in greater amount inside of it. Dominic reached to dictate the Cathedral of the Sacred Writing in the University of Palencia, but his natural vocation for the preaching, and his desire to divulge the usage of the Rosary in the most remote regions of Castile and Aragon, in this action stood out enough as to convince the lords of Tharsis that they were before the right man to found the first anti-Guillem order in the history of the Church. Dominic was capable to live in extreme poverty, he knew to preach and to wake up the faith in Christ and the Virgin, he gave proofs of real sanctity, and he surprised with his inspired wisdom. To him would be difficult to deny the right to gather those who believed in his work. But, to make that such right could not be denied by the Guillems, was necessary for Dominic to become known out of Spain, to give the example of humility and sanctity. The Bishop of Osma Diego de Civita, who shared in secrecy the ideas of the Lords of Tharsis, decided that the best place to send Dominique was the south of France, region which in that period was frenzied by a struggle with the Church. The majority of the Occitanian people had converted to the Cathar religion, that according to the Church, constituted an abominable heresy, and without that the Benedictines of the Cistercian and Cluniac order, so powerful in the rest of France, would have achieved to avoid it. With that purpose, the Bishop Diego obtained the representation of the infant Don Fernando, to arrange the marriage with the daughter of Earl de la Marca, what gave him the opportunity of travelling to France, carrying Dominique de Guzman with him, to whom he had named presbyter. That journey allowed him to get internalized in the Cathar heresy, and to project a plan. In the second journey to France, once dead the daughter of the Count, and decided the mission of Dominique, both clerics travelled to Rome. There the Bishop Diego prepared before the terrible Guillaume Pope, Innocent III, the authorization to go around the Languedoc, preaching the gospel and teaching the use of the rosary. Once obtained the authorization, both travelled from Montpellier to preach in the cities of the Limiti. They made it barefoot and begging sustentation, not differing too much from the pure men, that transited profusely the same paths. The humility and austerity is notably contrasted to the luxury and pomp of the papal legacies, which in those days also travelled the country trying to put end to the Catharism, and with the ostensible richness of the archbishops and bishops. However, they pick up proofs of hostility in many villages and cities, neither for their acts, that the pure men respected, nor even for the preaching, but for what they represented, the Church of Jehovah Satan. But such results were already disposed by Petronio and Diego de Osma, who had imparted precise instructions to Dominique about the strategy to follow. The perspective of the Lords of Tharsis was the next. Observing from Spain the open combative attitude assumed by the people of Ek to priests of Jehovah Satan, and considering the experience that the House of Tharsis had in similar situations, the evident conclusion indicated that the consequence would be the destruction, the ruin, and the extermination. In opinion of the Lords of Tharsis, the collective suicide was not necessary, and, on the contrary, that only benefited the enemy. But was also clear that the Cathars were not warned completely about the situation, perhaps for unknowing the diabolic evil of the Guillaume that constituted the secret government of the Roman Church, and for perceiving just the superficial aspect, and more shocking, of the Catholic organization. But, even if the Cathars not supposed that the Guillaume, from the College of Temple Constructors, of the Cistercian order, they had decreed the extermination of the pure men, and the destruction of the civilization of Ek, and that they would comply that sentence up to its last details, was not less true that such possibility would not concern them at all. As touched by a mystical madness, the pure men had their eyes nailed in the origin, in the Grail, and they were indifferent to the future of the world. And was already seen how effective was such tenacity that allowed the manifestation of the Grail, and the Universal Emperor, and caused the failure of the wide fraternity plans. In front of the intransigence of the Cathars, Dominique and Diego appealed to an external procedure, which could not be discouraged by the Church. They warn, to whom wanted to hear, about the secure destruction that will guide them the declared sustenance of the heresy. But they not listen. To the believers that constitute the majority of the Occitan population, and that, as all religious mass, didn't comprehend the philosophical subtleties, it is impossible for them to believe that the evil could triumph over the good, that's to say, that the Roman Church could effectively destroy the Cathar Church. And to the Cathars, who know that the evil can triumph over the good in the earth, they don't care about it, because in every case are just variations of the illusion. For the pure man, the unique reality is the spirit, and that truth means the definitive and absolute triumph of the good over the evil, that is to say, the eternal permanence of the reality of the spirit and the final dissolution of the material world. in the year 1208, and, while the population is affirmed in these positions, the Pope Innocent III announced the crusade, in reprisal for the death of his legacy Peter of Castelaux. It is too late to make effective the preaching of Saint Dominic. However, the main objective of the mission, that was to impose the saint image of Dominic, and to make known his aptitudes as organizer and founder of religious communities, was having success. In such year, while the slaughter of Béziers and other Guillaume atrocities, Saint Dominic realized his first foundation in Fongex, near to Carcassonne. He had comprehended immediately that the Occitanian ladies manifested a special predisposition for the spiritual élève, and due to this he established there the monastery of Prouilly, which nuns would be dedicated to the Childrencha, and to the cult of the Virgin of the Rosary. The first eps was Myla de Tharsis, great initiated in the cult of the cold fire. She was sent from Spain to that function, and she applied then one of the strategic principles signalized by Petronio. To escape from the Guillaume control, in some measure, was indispensable to dismiss the Reglemonacum of Saint Benedict. Henceforth, Saint Dominic gives to the nuns of Prouilly the rule of Saint Augustine. Of course, Saint Dominic and Diego de Osma not acted alone. They were aided by some nobles and clerics that professed in secrecy the cult of the cold fire, and received spiritual assistance of the lords of Tharsis. Amongst them were the Archbishop of Narbonne and the Bishop of Télissa, who contributed to that work with important sums of money. This last one, Genoese initiate called VILLCA, infiltrated by the lords of Tharsis in the Cistercian order, and who would not be discovered until the end. In such days the Bishop VILLCA passed as sworn enemy of the Cathars, defensor of the Catholic orthodoxy, and he took advantage of that prestige to promote before the papal legacies and his superiors about of the Cistercian order, the monastic work of Dominic and his personal sanctity. In the next years, Saint Dominic tried to carry out the plan of Petronio, and founded a semi-secular brotherhood, to the type of the chivalric orders, denominated Militia Christi, from which would emerge the Toirisotto di Penitentia Sancti Dominici, whose members were known as tertiary friars. But, soon this organization resulted ineffective for the searched objectives, and had to be thought in something more perfect and of greater amplitude. For many years was planned the new order, taking in consideration the collected experience and the formidable task that was proposed to carry out, this is, to fight against the Guillaume strategy. Collaborated with Saint Dominic in such projects a group of 16 initiates, coming from different places of the Languedoc, who gathered periodically in Télissa. Amongst them was the Bishop VILLCA. As a consequence of those speculations, was decided that the most convenient was to create a Hyperborean circle, hidden behind a Catholic order. The circle would be a super-secret society, directed by the lords of Tharsis, which would operate inside of the new monastic order. Only in this way, they concluded, would be obtained the searched objective with the principle of security. Such secret group, integrated in the beginning just by 16 initiates that I've already mentioned, was called Circulus Dominicanis, that is to say, Circle of the Lords of the Dog. That name is explained remembering the premonitory dream of the mother of Dominic de Guzman, in which his future son appeared as a dog who carried a burning axe, and considering that for the initiates in the cold fire, the dog was a representation of the soul, and the Lord, par excellence, was the spirit. In every Hyperborean initiate, the spirit must dominate the soul, and assume the function of Lord of the Dog. Thence, the adopted denomination for the circle of initiates, which also had the advantage of being confused with the name Dominicani, that is, Dominicans, that the people gave to the monks of Dominic de Guzman. It must be added, that to be a lord of the dog in the mystical of the cold fire, is analogous to be a lord of the horse, which means the knight, in the mysticism of the night age, where the soul is symbolized by the horse. One of the initiates, Pedro Celery, had donated many houses in Télissa. Some of them were destined to secret places, for meeting of the circle, and others were adapted for their use, of the future order. when all was ready, was arranged to obtain the authorization of Innocent III for the foundation of Preacher Mendicant Order, similar to the founded by Saint Francis of Assisi in 1210. To this order Innocent III had approved immediately, but the new solicitude came now from Telesa, a country in holy war, in which everybody was suspect of heresy, and was necessary to act with caution. The plan was ambitious, but just the unquestionable personality of Saint Dominic would smooth away all difficulties, just as the own Saint Francis did. It must not be forgotten that the Gleam controlled all the Occidental monasticism from the Benedictine order and that they were hostile to the creation of new independent orders. The opportunity was presented only in 1215, when the Bishop VILLCA was convoked to the Four General Council of Lateran, and took with him Saint Dominic. There, they stumbled with the closed negative of Innocent III, who, as it is known, only seed after dreaming, with the Basilica at Lateran, threatening to collapse, was sustained in the shoulders of Dominic de Guzman. However, the authorization was merely oral, although perfectly legal, and was limited to accept the rule of Saint Augustine, reform proposed by Dominic, and to recommend the mission to fight against the heresy. After the death of Innocent III, in 1216, Honorius III gives the definite approval of the Order of Preachers, or Ordo Predicatorum, and allowed its expansion. Due to, in that moment, it only had the monasteries of Praui and Telesa. In first instance, entered to the order all the clerics of the House of Tharsis, that, as I said, were in majority university professors, carrying with them many other wise and erudites of the age. In a short time, because the order became an organization suitable for the high-level teaching, nonetheless, that the first general chapter gathered in Bologna in 1220 declared that it was treating about a mendicant order with minor rigor in the poverty that the one of Saint Francis. Saint Dominic died in 1221, leaving the control of the order in hands of an initiate of pure blood, the General Master Blessed Jordan of Saxony. However, in that moment the Gellams were struggling to achieve the institutionalization of a systematic inquisition of the heresy that allow them to interrogate any suspect and to obtain the information conducive to the sight of the Grail. If such institution was entrusted to the Benedictines, as was pretended, the end of the Cathar strategy would be faster than the predicted, not giving time to Frederick II to realize his plans to dilapidate the Gallien papacy. Thence, the insistence and the eloquence deployed by the Dominicans to present themselves as the best prepared order to perform such sinister function. But the Dominicans had some real advantages over the Benedictines. They not only constituted a local order, Eterpffongus of the Languedoc, where the Benedictines had lost influence long time ago, but they also disposed of monks with great theological instruction, appropriated to analyze the declarations that the Inquisition of the Faith demanded. The Dominicans disposed of indubitable capacity of mobilization in the Languedoc, and when the Gellams were convinced that the new order would be under their control and would allow the entry of their own inquisitors, they also approved the concession. In 1224, the Emperor Frederick II, who, even being already confronted with the papacy, he had cleared the situation of the Languedoc, and the necessity to support the order of preachers, renovates through a new imperial law the old Roman legislation that considered the non-official cults as lese majesty, that is to say, liable of death sentence. In this case, the law would be applied to the repression of the heresy. In 1231, notwithstanding that they were already working, the Pope, Gregory IX, institutes the special tribunals of the Inquisition, and entrusted its office to the orders of Saint Dominic and Saint Francis, in this last instance the Friar Ellis, a secret agent of Frederick II, in the Franciscan order, who would be general minister from 1232 to 1239, and that at the end, discovered by the Gleam, would pass openly to the Ghibelline side. However, prompt would only remain the Dominicans in charge of the Inquisition. two facts must remain clear when evaluating the step taken by the Order of St. Dominic when accepting the responsibility of the Inquisition. One is that represented the minor evil for the Cathars. Due to the repression executed directly by the Guillem would have been terribly more effective, as was demonstrated in Béziers, and in that way would be achieved, at least, sabotage the quest of the Grail, and to retard the fall of Montsegur, objective that was reached in great measure. And the other fact was that the Lords of Tharsis were perfectly conscious that the order would be infiltrated by the Guillem, and that they would open the doors to the most cruel and fanatic personages of the Catholic Orthodoxy, who would destroy without mercy, neither remorse the Cathars and their work. Even so, the balance indicated that it would be preferable to run that risk and allow the Guillems to be managed by their own account. To the most fanatic inquisitors that soon would act in the order should not be hampered openly, because that would alert to the Guillem. The tactic consisted, then, to subtly deviate to false clues, or other forms of heresy. In the first case, in fact, the Lords of the Dog achieved to, under the charge of heresy, to liquidate in the state the totality of the criminals, thieves, prostitutes of the Languedoc. They, naturally, never contributed with any information that could be useful to the Guillem, even if they were obeyed to confess the heresy by means of the torture. In the second case, the Dominican Inquisition produced an effect not desired by the Benedictine Guillem, the one that they were capable to counteract. Justly, by the same reasons that the Lords of the Dog could not avoid the Guillems, to exterminate the Cathars, this is, to not remain in the contradiction with the active laws, the Guillem could not avoid that the members of the chosen people be repressed, easily accused under the charge of heresy. And the Lords of Tharsis, who had not forgotten the accounts that they had pending since the age of the Visigothic kingdom of Spain, and the participation that they had in the Arab invasion. As for the subsequent intrigues to destroy the House of Tharsis, they had now in their hands, with the Inquisition, a formidable arm to return every hit. Was, in this way, how the Guillem verified with unpleasant surprise that the repression of the heresy ended in many opportunities, in the systematic persecutions of Jews, who were sent to the stake with same or major cruelty, of the Cathars. That was, naturally, the effect of the occult task of the Lords of the Dog, which unfortunately was not as effective as they wanted, due to, as the Cathars, the Jews heretics, had to be offered the possibility of the Catholic conversion, what saved their lives, thing that they used to accept without problems, to converting themselves in Marranos, in other words, conserving their religion in secret, and simulating to be Christians, aversely to the pure men, who preferred to die, before to fail to the honor, and lie about their religious beliefs. In some time passed by, the Cathar heresy was giving way to the most reassuring Catholic religion, the initial furor of the Inquisition was appeasing, and the order of preachers was completing unjustified fame of repressor organization with other fame more appropriated to the spirit of its founders. The one of order dedicated to the study, the teaching, and the preaching of the Catholic faith. The great theological system of the scholastic is consequence in high grade to the work of notable Dominican writers and thinkers, who, in almost every case were not initiates, but they were guided secretly by them. To develop that activity, the order was concentrated in two prestigious universities, the one of Oxford and Paris. Will be enough to remember that professors as the German St. Albertus Magnus, or St. Thomas Aquinas, were Dominicans, to comprehend that the acquired by the order was completely justified. But were also that Dominicans Roland of Cremona, who taught in Paris between 1229 and 1231. Peter de Tarantasia, who did it from 1258 to 1265, and reached to be Pope, with the name of Innocent V, in 1276. Roger Bacon, Richard de Fischer, and Vicente de Bovalis, in Oxford, etc. We must have present, Dr. Setonal, that the Lords of Tharsis possessed the Hyperborean wisdom, and, in consequence, they worked according to the ancient historic perspective. They considered, for example, that in those decades of gleam influence were inevitable, but that, finally, would pass. So would reach the moment to expurgate the order. Because that was the strategically important, to preserve the control of the order and the institution of the Inquisition for a future opportunity. When this occasion would be presented, all the force of the horror and the repression unleashed by the Cistercians' gleam, as a hit of jiu-jitsu, could be returned against their own creators. And no one would feel offended for that, especially in the Languedoc. The weight of the strategy, as is adverted, rested in the capacity of the Lords of the Dog Circle, to maintain in secret their existence, and conserve the control of the order. That would not be, because the gleam ended to suspect that a strange will inside the order was frustrating all the plans of the order. But, every time that someone was near to the truth, the Demonicanus executed him secretly, and they attributed the death to predictable vengeance of the Exitan heretics. To these motivations, purely strategic, that animated the Lords of Tharsis to work occulted in the Circulus Demonicanus, would be added soon the pure necessity to survive, as a consequence of the events occurred in Spain, and that I will begin to expose tomorrow. As will be seen, the destruction of the Templar Order, and with it the failure of the synarchic plans of the wide fraternity, would become a matter of life and death for the House of Tharsis. The last strategy at the Circulus will take us to that exoteric cause of the enemy plan's failure, that was Philip IV, and of whom I referred 4 days ago.